Sydney, hi. Thanks for joining in. I hope you enjoyed watching the documentary. I think one of the things I wanted to get at was, of course, firstly, that people would not forget the story of Teoh Beng Hock, and it's an important story to be documented because it was one of the examples in which many of the different institutions of government failed. And you could see that in a consecutive way when it had to do with the police, the MACC, the legal structures within the judiciary and so on. And all these institutions were in fact very closely working together to get the story not very well. The result of what you see was that the family at the end of the day was not given any vindication. So I think what I wanted people to know was the fact that it's really about the system and it's about the structure and institutions, and unless this is corrected, something similar like that can equally take place again. So if you see it, and if you remember from the documentary, I'm not saying that it's necessarily the case that even if there is a change in government, for example, the government needs to ensure that these institutions are strengthened and are made independent. So, for example, the MACC, the Attorney General's chambers especially, that's a really important element. And if there's a new government, if Pakistan comes to power, then they have to think of that and to remember that they have to allow these institutions to be strengthened and not just allow their own institution of the executive to be the only ones making decisions.
Okay, open up to the floor. Who's going to ask the next question? Don't be shy.
Did they start a fund to assist the family of Teoh Beng Hock?
Yeah, is there a fund to assist the family of Teoh Beng Hock?
There is a fund. It's actually started by the Selangor government, and YB Teo Ni Ching, if I believe, she is one of the trustees of the fund. And the fund is mainly to contribute to the son, to Teo Erjia and his education and his future and so on. I'm not sure how much there is in the fund at the moment, but there's the movement, of course, Justice for Beng Hock. And they've been going around the country, and they're not just talking about Beng Hock's story anymore. They're also looking at other death in custody cases, which I think is a very bold move, and it's very giving of the family in that sense, because it means that they're looking at the big picture and how this is not just a one-off incident. As Edmund Bond said in the documentary, it's important for people to look at the bigger system, that really this is something that affects everyone. And there have been many other death in custody cases which have happened over the years, people whose names we have not remembered or just completely undocumented. So I think this is what we've tried to do in the documentary. I mean, looking at the case as well as looking at the big picture of what are the things that need to be corrected within the system. It's really a systemic issue here, I think.
Another question that we have is, has there been any developments in the case since you produced the film? Has there been a response in any way or any further developments not documented in the film?
Since the film came out, there hasn't been actually any development. I have to say that the MECC was open enough for me to interview them, so I went to their premises and so on. Even then, I think they received some flack from the very top. I heard that they got a call from the Prime Minister's office asking them, why did you grant Tricia this interview? So I think there were some internal problems there. As far as the case is concerned, when we had the last Google Hangout and we invited Rilan, the sister, to speak with us on the panel, she said that what happened was they filed a judicial review on the open verdict that was decided upon in the inquest. So this is the inquest that took place before the RCI, not the RCI verdict. But so they filed a judicial review on the open verdict, and that was more than 2 years ago. And since then, the court has not even granted them a date So I think it's just a delay tactic. You know, it's really unfair to leave the family out in the open like that. And of course, as you know, everyone's been waiting for the elections, and I suppose that in that sense, the judiciary was also asked to hold off and not give them any date. The other thing is the family has also filed a civil suit against the MACC and the 3 officers named in the Royal Commission of Inquiry report. So this is actually the reason that the MACC Chief Commissioner said he could not see me at the time, because the family filed a civil suit against him, and he was therefore advised by his lawyers not to grant me an interview personally. So these are the 2 ongoing suits or legal cases that I know are going on, but as to whether there's any progress, I think it's left as that. I mean, I think as far as the government is concerned, they're just looking at the conclusion of the RCI report, and they stick to the statement and the conclusion that Teoh Beng Hock was driven to suicide. And in fact, this was the line that was taken by the MACC when I went to interview them, and I asked them tough questions about this. They did not say anything beyond what was in the report, and they were not willing to go beyond that. So I think that is the stand of the government as far as they are concerned.
Yes.
Tricia, you got any other plans for any follow-up stories?
It's difficult to say. I mean, right now, when there's no real development to the case, well, the only thing that, well, one thing I really wanted to do in the documentary, but I could not because the person was not willing to speak, was apparently when we were going through the case itself, there was someone who had anonymously said that he had received a phone call from one of the MACC officers saying that he had done something. But even at the time, I don't know who the person was, and I think he's probably left the MACC by now. It's impossible, and I think even to get him on board would probably jeopardize his own safety. So that's the only thing I can see as a development. But going on from now, it's a really tough thing. I mean, even the family members have been asking me and have been asking their own lawyers, like, what can we do? What can we do? I can only think of a change in government when the case can be reopened again. So as far as whether there's any follow-up to the story that I can do, not at the moment. I mean, of course, the documentary is a good way of telling people and basically just spreading it around. In fact, I just got my new, I got the DVDs that I produced today. You guys can see it. I'm planning to either sell it or distribute it for free if I can around the country, especially as the elections are coming up. There'll be sort of, road shows and election speeches. But to do with the story itself, I think some of us have hit pretty much a roadblock here. I mean, if the courts are close to it, then as far as the legal process and the legal procedure is concerned, I can't see where else we can go with the matter.
Just a follow-up question. If there is a change in government, do you think the case will reopen?
I think when there is a change in government, there will be a lot of things that the new government will have to do. I hope they will reopen the case, but I think we need to speak to a lawyer, some kind of a RCI expert as to the options available. So whether you go about doing the RCI again or not doing the whole thing again, but just reopening the stories of what the witnesses had given and then coming to a different conclusion, doing something at least a little bit stricter to reprimand the officers in charge, knowing that the people who were named in the MACC nothing has been done to them. So I think there will be different options as to whether the case is open again. I think something needs to be done, but what exactly will be done, I think, will remain to be discussed.
Have you or the family put it to the Pakatan leadership, the question of whether or not they are prepared to take up this case and should they be elected as government?
I think it's not been explicitly requested to the leadership, because I think it's, for example, I mean, Gobind Singh, who is a member of parliament in DAP, he's the family's lawyer, and this is something that he would certainly push for if there was a change in government. I myself would be pushing for something to happen, but the what that something would be, we are not clear. I mean, I do have some relationship with the Pakatan Rakyat, but as to whether they will take up all the proposals that we set up, I'm not clear. But I mean, it's not just this, you know. I think it's also about all the other cases. I mean, recently you've got the case of Sugumaran, who was said to have been beaten up by police just before he died, you know, handcuffed, turmeric powder thrown into his face, so he was found with yellow powder on his face. The government, well, Dr. Pointed was also asked to come and do the second autopsy for him, but eventually that didn't come to pass for other political reasons. But it's just to give an example of how, yes, we can do something for Teoh Beng Hock. I mean, yes, the case probably can be reopened. Some kind of justice can be served where the officers in charge are probably reprimanded. But I think looking at a long-term situation, so I'm going back to the issue of the system and the structure, how do we avoid things like this from happening? A few options would be, for example, looking at how to address police misconduct, like the IPC-MC commission, that has to be looked into again. And secondly, the Bar Council has actually proposed to have a coroner's court set up, so that it's not just when there's a big outcry and political hue and cry that a coroner's court will be set up, but it is something that happens on a consistent basis when there is a sudden death that takes place and with no answers. A coroner's court can be set up immediately without having to wait for the agitation of people protesting outside the MACC or outside the court. So we're looking at what are the kinds of things that need to be put in place so that when something like that occurs again, you don't have that kind of stress that the family had to go through, and you're kind of pushing against the boulder, pushing against a system which is it's very, very difficult to deal with. Yeah.
One more question, perhaps over the back there.
Hi. First of all, I must thank you for the very presentation. It was very courageous of you to go to all extent to do that.
Thank you.
What I would like to know is that how long have you shown this presentation to how wide an audience, and what is the feedback, particularly from the younger generations of Malaysians? In particular, I try not to be racial itself, but I think your message or the theme, if you may call it, behind this kind of presentation is well known to many non-Bumiputra because of our experience. Now, my interest is to find out what is your feedback from the younger Malaysians.
Okay.
Did you receive any?
Yeah. Okay, so firstly about where we've gone to. So this was launched in September last year to a big crowd in KL.
Little with the connection.
Film Fest. This documentary was done as part of the Freedom Film Fest. And what we do, or what they do every year, and this year I had the opportunity of following them around, was to go around the whole country. So we had a road show. We brought the documentary to places like Johor, Penang, Perak, Singapore, Sabah and Sarawak. So these were the 6 places that we went to. And I think it was good because we not only went to the major cities, but like in Johor, we went to smaller towns, very, very Malay areas. in Perak, we went to Ipoh, but in Penang, we also went to the other side, the mainland. So I think the Freedom Film Fest did try as much as possible to go out into the more rural areas. And that was something they tried to make us be very aware of. So for example, the original documentary is in Malay. The one that you watched was in English, but the one that we screened around the country was in Malay, so that it could get into a bigger and wider audience. The target audience for Freedom Film Fest documentaries is actually very much the Malay audience, because these kinds of human rights issues are already very well known in the middle class and in urban areas. The response of the people, I think the young were agitated, and I think it was more they felt frustrated that they were not able to do anything. So the questions that came back to me and the rest of us were, for example, what actually can we do? Things look so dismal, and so there's always a big debate about whether they should do it as part of civil society or whether they should do it as part of a political party route. And I think this is a question that everyone has to ask. I mean, not just for this case, but what is the best route to change things in the country? Do you do it in a non-partisan way, or do you jump right into politics? So that's one of the feedback that came to us. Whether the specific Malay audience, what was their response? I think, to be honest, and if I were to be honest about this issue, the Teoh Beng Hock issue is a very Chinese one. Okay, when it happened in 2009, mainly Chinese newspapers were reporting it. And this also represents the difficulty about the race polemic in Malaysia, which you all already know, where even something like death in custody, which should by right transcend all races, comes down to it that if there was if there was a Malay death, then it would have been taken up more within the Malay segment. But having said that, when we went down to the ground, when there were Malay people watching the documentary, they were moved by it. And of course, I spoke in Malay in response to their questions, and some of them, they recognize that this is not just a race issue, and it has to go back to the MACC. And I think it also helped that I tried to emphasize the other cases that have happened. So it's not Beng Hock, but there's also what happened to Kugan. It's also what happened to Ahmad Sarbaini, who is the customs officer who, ironically enough, died also at the MACC, a year later. So using cases like that, not that we want to necessarily make it into like a one Malaysia thing, but it just so happens that there are people from every race that have been subjected to the same kind of treatment, and when people are reminded of this, then they realize that it's not just about Beng Hock. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before we say call it a close, perhaps a question that's on everybody's minds here, Tricia, is are you optimistic about the prospects for change as we approach the elections?
Okay, that's a tough question to answer. I think the mood on the ground here is very much dependent on who you are with and who you're hanging out with. It's quite a disparate kind of response depending on which group you're with. I tend to, of course, happen to know a lot of people who are pro-opposition friendly. So the sentiment within Pakatan itself is very strong. There's a very, very strong belief that there will be a change in government. When you speak to the fence-sitters, they're a little bit more apathetic and ambivalent about the outcome. But I think this time the race will be very, very close. Even, election analysts are saying that there could be a situation where it's actually very, very tight, and I'm not sure. I mean, it could even be a hung parliament situation in which case votes in Sabah and Sarawak would actually have to count very strongly. So I think that's where the incident that's happening and unfolding as we speak in Sabah is also something to really take note of. But whether there's a prospect for change, I would say I'm about 65% sure that there would be change. By the way, I'm doing some work for them, so I have to add that as a caveat. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Both tremendous films, and I'd like to thank you all for persevering and staying on. And
can I just ask one more question?
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Can you handle one more question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, no female has been able to ask any
That's the
question.
problem.
So I thought I should do one. When you talk about fence sitters and their opinion, I presume maybe there are more fence sitters in the non-Malay groups, perhaps maybe the Chinese groups. I think it'd be important to say that there is a difference between how they feel about politics and being a bit cynical about change. But I think nonetheless, your kind of film and the Teoh Beng Hock case is more about injustice, and that fence sitters can perhaps associate that more, and some of that cynicism may be less when it comes to such an unjust case. So it would be good to still, plug and push your film, how it can be shown, to as big an audience during this pre-election, or perhaps at the time when the campaign is on, so that everyone remembers Teoh Beng Hock, and it's not just about politics. It's about a change in basic, how justice is carried out in the country, and that hopefully would let the fence sitters think that if injustice such as this cannot be changed except through a political change, they will no longer be fence sitters.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, I'd like to remind people before they go, if you haven't done it yet, please do one of those photographs.
And I'll be ready to photograph
Adrian should
you.
be ready to go with pieces of paper and camera. And also, if you haven't made a donation or feel more inspired after seeing these two powerful films, Helen's over here with the collection box. But finally, I have to thank all the people that make this possible. And there are so many, I can't name them all. But I really do want to do a special thanks to Kevin here, because Kevin was Kevin's idea originally, and it was the idea to show a couple of films and have a discussion. And it started to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And most people would have panicked and said, "Oh my God, I started to show a film and then it becomes a panel discussion." But he didn't give up. He persevered, and you must agree with me, surely, that it's been a really interesting program and well organized. A few glitches here and there, but for goodness sake, it's pretty amazing. So please give a big clap. A real gotong royong in a sense, and all generations, young and old, participated. Now, next time around, more women speaking, more and the young ones too. Don't be so shy. It's your future. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.